Why is this couple smiling? Perhaps they found hope, meaning, and purpose in the book of Revelation. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a lonely man on a distant island received a remarkable vision. Some readers have been frightened by his vision, but many more have found in it the hope, meaning, and purpose they were looking for. And now, here are your hosts, Dr. John Pauline and Dr. Graham Bradford.
Hi, I'm John.
And I'm Graham.
And we want to welcome you again to Revelation, Hope, Meaning, Purpose. Graham, we've been on a journey throughout the book of Revelation. We've touched base on each of the 22 chapters. And this is our chance to kind of sum up and put together the things that we think are the most important, perhaps, for people to remember. We'd like to begin by putting, once again, the 7-part chiasm on the screen. And you see there's 7 major visions in the book of Revelation. There's a prologue and an epilogue that sort of sandwich the two sides. On the left side, as you ascend up the pyramid, are a series of visions that run from the time of John to the second coming of Jesus. On the right side, descending the pyramid, are a series of visions that focus on the end of time. We're going to summarize the various steps of the end time in our next scene after this one. But in the middle there, the final crisis, this is the heart of the book, this is the center of the focus, and there's 3 themes in particular, I think, that are important. First of all, the people of God, called remnant, called 144,000, called saints, and also worship as a central theme, and also Sabbath as a special theme in the final crisis of Earth's history.
Sure. And coming into the center, and perhaps we could have this back again, because when you come into the center of this chiasm, you've got a signal saying as you come in, the Ark of the Covenant is open, the Ark of the 10 Commandments, pointing into the crisis. As we come out, before the plagues are poured out, we see the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven, which is the tabernacle of the 10 Commandments. And God is sort of pointing in, hey, the commandments of God, particularly the first table of who, how, and when you worship is really in focus here as a response to the gospel.
And commandments is not about telling other people what to do. I think it's a bit more like when you buy a new automobile and there's a manual there in the box on the right-hand side. Those are the rules for operating the car. The people who made the car know how it best functions. God made us. He knows how we function. If we follow His rules for life, we'll be happier, healthier, and so on.
We find hope, meaning, and purpose when we're in harmony with God.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, I bought a special hat on Patmos in order to summarize this book. Would you like to see it?
I would, yes.
I think you remember it. As you can see and probably hear, we're on a hill overlooking the beautiful harbor of Patmos, where John received a vision.
Isn't it amazing that this man 2,000 years ago could write a book which could have hope, give hope, meaning, and purpose to all generations? Yeah, it can challenge the very learned person like yourself. It's something for people with very little education, and I think that's a tremendous achievement for one person on this island 2,000 years ago.
And I think we ought to really emphasize the point that the key to this book is right there in the first line. This is not the revelation of Armageddon. It's not the revelation of Middle Eastern oil. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. And that means if you have studied this book and don't have a deeper appreciation of Jesus, you haven't understood it.
And I'm mindful too, John, that it was Jesus who said, study the book of Daniel. And in this series, we've just alluded to it, but we haven't really done it as fully as we'd like to do. And so Jesus said, go back, and as you face the end time, understand what Daniel said about powers that will work against the gospel going to the world.
And John certainly affirms that in the very first verse of the book, where he points the reader back to Daniel as a critical element. Another thing that we've discovered in our journey is that the very, very center of the book, the very, very key point, is in Revelation 14:7, where it says, worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the fountains of waters. Ultimately, the purpose of this book is not to satisfy our curiosity about the future, but it's to motivate us to stake our lives on God and to worship Jesus Christ.
John, this has been a thrilling journey for me. And I believe for you too. And I think I've learned so many important things.
Yeah.
But I still think there's more to learn.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way too? You do, don't you?
Absolutely. I think every time I pick up this book, I learn something.
And all we've done with people is just share with them what we've learned. And we would like them to join this journey with us, the thrill of discovery as we find more hope, more meaning, more purpose to life.
Okay.
Those two fellows got a little bit chummy there, huh?
Well,
it was a nice journey.
It was a nice journey.
And this has been a nice journey.
Yeah, and I've appreciated it too.
Yeah.
John, not everyone in this world has this hope, meaning and purpose that we have found from this book. You know, what sort of message does it have for people who have felt rejected in life? I mean, there are people who are really discouraged out there, aren't there?
I think there are people who aren't sure where their next meal is coming from.
Oh yeah, and there are people in war-torn zones of the world where their life is always in jeopardy. You know, it's tough.
There are lots of people who feel rejected by their family, by their society.
And people who wonder where their next meal is going to come from, and they feel so lonely, as if there's nobody, you know, nobody who cares. There are orphans out there with no parents, no one to care for them.
I think a lot of people feel like life just doesn't really make sense.
Because there doesn't appear to be a future. Many people are wondering if this world really does have a future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think of my mom, you know, she's coming to the end of her life and she couldn't move around much anymore. I mean, what does it have to say to them?
And people who live in pain, and we're conscious that people all their life, let's say 24 hours a day almost, except when they're sleeping, if they can sleep, they're knowing pain like arthritis, and they're crippled, and it's doom and gloom. What message does this book have for them?
A lot of people are missing loved ones, spouses, children, parents, grandparents that really dear to them, and now they're gone. What about them?
And it doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah.
So this book really, I believe myself, has a very special part to play in the lives of a wide variety of people. It really does.
What do you think John would answer to all these questions?
All right, let's hear what he has to say. Let's look at some of the statements he makes towards the end of the book. Revelation 22 and verse 13 is this statement: I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. And again in verse 16, we have this other statement made which parallels it. I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to give you this testimony for the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star. So we say to ourselves, what message at the end of the book like this brings hope to these people? What sort of message? Well, I guess we'd say that Jesus is there. He's the first, He's the last. He sits on His throne. He wants to share it with us one day. Surely that should help, shouldn't it? You'd think so? I think it would. The world down here can be doom and gloom, but up there, God is in control, and Revelation, He's saying, I was there at the beginning, I'm there now, and I'll be there at the end. And in the end, if you trust in me, we're going to get through this mess together, really. All right, the next statement is found in Revelation 22, verses 8 and 9, and here's another message. I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things, and when I had heard and seen them, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who had been showing them to me. But he said to me, do not do it. I am a fellow servant with you and with your brothers the prophets, and of all those who keep the words of this book, worship God. Okay, it seems like there's a very important message coming through right at the end, isn't there? Worship God. Don't worship an angel. Don't worship anybody else. Worship God. Would this be the central focus of this book then? Worship God. We were made this way, weren't we? To have fellowship with God and to worship Him. And we are happiest when we realize the purpose of our creation. And God is worth worshiping, isn't He? Absolutely.
I think there's one more point that John would make, and that point is found in chapter 22 and verse 7. Behold, I am coming soon. Blessed is he who keeps the words of the prophecy in this book. I am coming soon. I think John would say that the hope of Jesus coming is one thing that can be truly central to us. And as Pamela mentioned earlier, it isn't just a pie in the sky, a future hope, but it's also one that we can begin to taste right now. And I think it can change our perceptions right now. I remember a scholarly conference where there were a bunch of scholars who seemed rather skeptical to me. They didn't really believe, but yet Scripture was their study. The Bible was their academic pursuit. You know, and they were arguing about Paul back and forth, one of the writers of the New Testament, and say, well, you know, did Paul really believe in the resurrection and judgment? Or, well, we think this and we think that. And the discussion went on for a time. There was one fellow there who I never took to be much of a believer, but finally he got tired of it. He says, I'm sorry. He says, I have to say something here. He says, you guys can say whatever you want about Paul, but I know that Paul believed that Jesus was coming again, and he believed in judgment. And frankly, he believed in resurrection of the dead. And he says, if there is no judgment, if there is no resurrection of the dead, then there will never be any justice in this world. The book of Revelation is the clearest path to genuine justice that there is. When all hope in this world fails, there is still the hope of the resurrection, the hope of Jesus soon coming. That is a place I think John would direct us to. When we return from the break, we're going to have a look at the steps of the final crisis of Earth's history, summarizing the entire book of Revelation in just 10 minutes. We'll see you then. Now it's time we can talk about the final steps in Earth's history. If you take the entire book of Revelation, particularly the middle and the latter parts, and you put together everything that the book of Revelation has to say about the last period of Earth's history, what are the steps in that final crisis? Notice that somebody is living through the middle of that and asking, you know, how would I know where we are, where we stand? I think you have a series of about 12 steps in the final crisis of Earth's history. All of this is future from our perspective. We're talking about the very, very final events of Earth's history. The very first of these events is a worldwide proclamation of the gospel. In other words, we are called in the end of time to see the gospel go to the whole world. Obviously, to some degree, God is going to play a major part in that because it involves, I think, perhaps a bigger plan than simply any one human strategy can do.
Agreed.
But the promise is the gospel will go to the world before the end comes. It's not going to happen without that.
No.
A second step is the worldwide counterfeit of the gospel. The true gospel has its counterpart, a gospel that is contrary to the true gospel, but in many ways may seem very, very similar. These two gospels are clashing or dueling in the world at the end of time. The one is related to the Holy Trinity, the other to the unholy Trinity. You have the three angels on the one side presenting that gospel to the world. You have the three frogs bringing the demonic gospel to the world. The end result of these two gospels are two groups. On the one hand, a worldwide confederacy of the remnant, the saints, the 144,000 different ways of expressing them. And these are kindred spirits from every nation, every tribe, every religious background.
A great multitude that no one can number.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is when you know God and you connect with someone else who knows God, there's an instant bond. It doesn't matter what color they are, doesn't matter where they've come from, there's an instant connection, an instant bond, an instant friendship. And I've been fortunate on 6 continents to develop very close friends from a wide variety of backgrounds with that connection. On the other hand, the institutional religions of the world will feel threatened by this genuine spirituality and will link together to gain political, economic, military power to achieve their ends. The third step in the final crisis of Earth's history will be a worldwide political unity, a real United Nations, perhaps for the first time in world history, all the political powers of the world will see a common cause in coming together, probably to save the earth from ecological destruction or some similar crisis that may come their way. Now, if we could put those steps back on the screen just for a moment, these first three, I don't think it's clear in the book of Revelation exactly what order that they come in. Because does the gospel come first and then the reaction against the gospel? Or does the counterfeit precipitate a situation where the gospel becomes center? Does the unity of nations somehow? It's not clear in the book of Revelation the order. I've placed them in the order I think is most likely.
Sure. For quite a while they're competing, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're competing, and both sets of religious groups profess to be the people of God.
Yeah.
That's what will be confusing.
And the nations are trying to figure out where to throw their weight behind these.
Yeah.
The fourth step in the final events of Earth's history is a final time of decision. The three angels go out to the world. In other words, the people of God, with the help of God, are spreading the true gospel everywhere around the world. The entire world has an opportunity to hear it and react to it. You could say at that time, this gospel versus counterfeit gospel becomes the substance of conversation. It's on CNN, you know, it's on the major networks.
It's a real hothouse situation.
Yeah.
Because the people of God then are like Elijah, calling the world to decision.
Yeah.
But the other side is bringing fire down from heaven.
That's right.
Yeah.
There will be miracles, there will be exciting things that happen, and according to Revelation, the greater power will seem to be on the side of the worldwide religious
and
institutions.
Probably the numbers too, I guess.
And the numbers as well. You see, and they can make the case, hey, you know, God is clearly blessing our side. You know, don't go after these people and follow them. And yet the people who truly know God will recognize those who know God, and they will come out of these institutions being attracted by the genuine presence of God in the lives of others. So this is a final time of decision. The true of heart will join God's side in spite of persecution, in spite of a loss perhaps of privilege or even buying and selling at some point. A fifth step in the final crisis is that the secular and religious confederacies unite. As things begin to spin out of control, the powers of the world will feel like they're losing control, like Demetrius there in Ephesus that you mentioned. They're beginning to think things are out of control, and the problem is these people who aren't going with the program. There's people in every country, people in every religion that are causing trouble. You see, and if we can deal with them, then maybe we can get control of the larger situation. Maybe the world can be saved from disaster. So there'll be a time when the religious and political powers of the world will find a common cause in an attempt to save the world from what they perceive is a coming disaster. The book of Revelation teaches that at that point, the religious institutions will for a time gain the primary say-so. None of these are currently in place. These are all things that in many ways would be surprising in today's world. And yet the book of Revelation has been right all the way through history, and I believe it will prove in the end to be right once more.
Yeah.
The sixth step along these lines is that the remnant, the people of God, the 144,000, the saints, the great multitude, they will be singled out for destruction. They are the cause of the problem, and the world will marshal its forces. That will be the final call. Come out of Babylon. You see, if the people of God now stay in Babylon, they will be aiding the powers of the world against the true kindred spirits. And so genuine followers of God will come streaming out of all the institutions that have joined with Babylon and will be uniting with each other in a grand spiritual coalition.
It's a real hothouse situation, isn't
Yeah.
it? Really, it is. While one side is appealing, we have the numbers, we have the miracles, we bring fire down from heaven, as it were.
We've got the money.
This is Pentecost again, and we are the people of God.
We've got the guns.
Another crowd is saying, here's the real gospel.
That's right.
And this is Babylon, come out. And both sides, it's really a swelling, growing, isn't it?
And no person on earth at that point will be able to ignore that there will be a sifting. Things will go into two camps more and more. And brother and sister may be separated. Husband and wife may be separated by these things.
Yeah.
Yes. So then the next step which would be the seventh, is the close of probation. As these two sides sharply distinguish themselves, then comes the time when there's going to be no more crossing over. And that's the close of probation. When everyone has made a firm and solid decision one way or another, the crisis can begin to come to a close.
It's not an arbitrary thing. God says, oh, bad luck, you just missed out by a few seconds. No. Both sides have settled in their course, and now we're going to see how different they really are.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, and the behavior from that time on.
Onwards.
Then the eighth step in the final crisis, the world powers will attack. And again, these are general terms. Will that be with laws, with sanctions, with threats, taking away privileges, economic boycott,
mark in
a lot
the right
of different things.
Forehead, symbolic mark, yeah.
But there is an attack on the people of God. There's an attempt at some point to either force them to come back into the fold or be destroyed. And at that moment is step 9. And step 9 is that Christ himself intervenes. The book of Revelation teaches that God will step in. When the nations have served his purposes, he will limit, he will stop their destruction of God's people. So God will intervene, and in that intervention, the 7 last plagues and things like that, when that intervention comes, the next step will come into place, and that is that the wicked will turn on their deceivers. The political powers, the military, economic powers will turn on the religious leaders that have deceived them, will turn on those institutions that have deceived them. It'll be a very ugly
time. And they're angry.
And they're
furious.
very angry.
Yeah, yes. They turn upon her. Yeah.
The 11th step in the final crisis then is the completion of the destruction at the second coming of Jesus, where the political powers and those that are left are finally brought to their end, and the people of God, step 12, are rescued and brought back to spend eternity with Jesus.
Is the 2 harvests. One, the grain harvest, which Jesus reaps and takes home.
Yeah.
The other, the wine harvest, which is the destruction of those who've under the forces of Babylon. Yeah, Jesus comes and brings it all to an end. Yeah,
that's right. Well, why don't you lead us into the next segment of our program today?
Okay, I'll be very happy to do that just after the break.
Okay.
Good. Welcome back. John, very few books of the Bible have suffered as this book. It has been misused and used for all political reasons and religious gain at times, and many people shy away from this book because people have brought it into disrepute, and they have neglected the fact that this book is a revealing of Jesus and all the speculation and wild stories that have gone round, and probably there's a very good reason why this book concludes with this type of wording as we're about to read here from Revelation chapter 22. It says here in verses 18 and 19, I warn everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds anything to them, God will add to him the plagues described in this book. And if anyone takes words away from this book of prophecy, God will take away from him his share in the tree of life and in the holy city, which are described in this book. You know, that's pretty strong.
It is.
That is very strong indeed. I mean, it's a very serious thing to tamper with this book. And you say to yourself, well, in what ways have people added to this book? Well, I guess they've gone to their newspapers, haven't they? They've seen all sorts of sensational events. I mean, as people have seen wars over the centuries, they've said the Napoleonic Wars, World War I, World War II, this is Armageddon. And they felt that they were sharing, I guess, the Bible with people, but, you know, it wasn't Armageddon. And they really missed the point that this book is a revealing of Jesus. And there's all sorts of wild stories about the war in Iraq and of people and of personalities. And I guess the 666 has been played around with quite a bit, hasn't it? As people have speculated there. And, you know, sometimes people have a concept that this book is just, you know, people are turned away, turned off from this book.
Is true.
But really this book has a precious message about revealing Jesus. So we're not to add to it. Now, what I like about what you did in your summary a little while ago is you just stayed with the text. You stayed with the text. This is what Revelation is saying, and where it is yet unfulfilled prophecy, we say, let's not speculate, let's not run ahead, because some things will become clear when it comes to pass. It's easy to speculate. It's a temptation, but we must stay with the text. All right. It also goes on to say here that if anyone deletes from this book, and you say to yourself, if you delete from this book, God's going to take your right to enter into the city. You know, and you say, how can people delete from this book? Well, I guess probably neglect its warnings. It has some pretty serious warning messages to go out, doesn't it? Really, it does. It's warning against a counterfeit gospel. It's warning against don't put your trust in signs, wonders and miracles. And it's a call to accept Jesus, the everlasting gospel. It means a response of keeping the commandments of God. And you could neglect to do that. You could say, I hear it, I understand it, but I don't want to follow it. And you could delete from this book in your mind by not reading it and not following its counsel and not taking it seriously. And that's a danger. It's a real danger. Or you could say, I might just look at the popular parts of the book and some parts are too difficult. I'm not going to worry about them. But I believe that this book came from Jesus. Nobody loves us like Jesus loves us. If he has said we ought to study these things, if this is a revealing of Jesus, then it's a very serious thing. Every Christian should take this word very seriously indeed. And when we take this book seriously, it does give us hope.
I think our viewers might be interested to know that in a real sense, the preparation for this series of programs has been 5 years in the making. And it's been a real challenge. I think this text has really challenged us because we want, as far as possible, not to add or to take away from this book. And I don't know that we have done it in any way perfectly. I think we have so much to learn. In fact, even in preparation, just the last few weeks preparing for programs like this one, we were learning new things.
Sure.
We're developing new things.
And we've sought very wide counsel from a variety of people. We've tried to use the very best scholarship available. And the interesting thing to me has been that the more we've searched, the more we've worked, the more we've explored, tapping into the very best of scholarship, the clearer has come the picture of Jesus, the end-time worship, the commandments of God, have all come as a central purpose of this book. And I'm thrilled how the big ideas are so clear, and we mustn't get worried and thrown about the little fringe bits which we're not too sure of yet. The big ideas are becoming clearer still. And rightly understood, this book builds hope, hope for the future. You know, hope is a precious thing. There are people who sit in buildings today and they looked out through glazed eyes. All hope has gone out of their life. All hope. You can tell by the expression on their face, there is no hope. You know, we live by hope. We hope tomorrow will be better. We hope we have better health. We hope things will work out. Now, this builds hope. Hope now and hope in the future because God is there and He's in control. It gives meaning. Gives meaning to what is happening in our lives because in our lives there are so many contradictory things happening. You want to serve God, you want to be faithful to God, and yet the more you want to serve God, the more things seem to go against you, and it doesn't make sense. Why? I can't make sense of it. This book says there is a whole great picture. You are part of that great picture of a conflict between good and evil, and it gives meaning and purpose, because there is purpose in the end. God is going to reward those who trust in Him. And the good news is, it's not by our worthiness. No matter how hard I work at my life, I'm never going to be good enough. I have to trust in Jesus. And that means I have hope, meaning, and purpose, because, John, we can make it. By the grace of God. Salvation is a free gift, and we can rejoice in that. And I thank God for this book and what it means to me personally.
All right. Very good. Well, the book itself has an appeal. Notice when you come to the end of the book of Revelation, the very last verses, there's an appeal to every reader. I think we want to give attention to those appeals right now. Revelation chapter 22 and verse 14. It says, "Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may go through the gates into the city." That appeal indicates there's something we can do, washing the robes, being prepared. Studying this book is part, I think, of that preparation. But then there's a dark side to the appeal in verse 15. It says, "Outside are the dogs, those who practice magical arts, the sexually immoral, the murderers, the idolaters, everyone who loves and practices falsehood." Now, it doesn't mean there'll be no pets in heaven. It is simply saying that though there were some of those neighborhood alley dogs kind of things, I think, that are in view here.
This is cultural again, isn't it?
Yeah,
The way they regard
it is
dogs.
saying that excluded from the city will be those who are bent on causing trouble, those who are bent on undermining the order of the universe and the order of society. The third text of this appeal is verse 17. The Spirit and the bride say, "Come," and let him who hears say, "Come." Whoever is thirsty, let him come, and whoever wishes, let him take the free gift of the water of life. You see, the problems of the world are constantly being fixed by the nations of the world, by the major philosophies, by the educators. There's a constant discussion. We need to fix these problems. We need to raise up the poor. We need to reorder society so that it's more fair. There's a constant debate, a constant work to attempt to fix these problems. But the problems of the world ultimately are matters of the heart. You'll notice that was the singular tenses throughout that appeal. It is the problems of the world will be fixed one heart at a time. Remember, the fault line between good and evil is not between us and them. It's right down in the center of our own hearts. God is calling you to be part of that fix. You can't depend on your church. You can't depend on your synagogue, your religion. You can only depend on God. And God is calling you to be part of that army, to be part of that bridal assembly, to be helping to fix the problems of the world one heart at a time. And as our hearts are united with God's, we will have hope, meaning, and purpose in our lives. And as other people see that hope, meaning, and purpose, they too will join in that final remnant. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about in the very next segment, the final remnant of Earth's history and what that means for you and me today.
Welcome back. And now John is going to talk a little bit more about the remnant and remnancy. And tell us, John.
Well, you remember earlier in our series, Leslie Pollard described his dissertation where he looked at the remnant in the book of Revelation, but also throughout the Bible. And one of the things that remnant studies have taught us is that the remnant is always a threefold concept in the Bible. It has a historical dimension, it has a present dimension, and a future dimension. You can see that on the screen right now. The historical dimension would be the remnant looking back at the past, where God has chosen a group of people who have served Him faithfully, and so on. Then the faithful remnant would be the present tense remnant. They are those among that historical remnant who have that connection with God we've been talking about, that faithful connection. Then the final remnant in each case is usually a much bigger group from some surprising directions and so on. Using the New Testament as an example, the historical remnant of the New Testament is clearly Israel of Old Testament times. God called Israel, God worked with Israel. You could look at them, name them, define them, count them, etc. It was very visible in the past. The present tense remnant would be all of Israel who were faithful to God in the context of the coming of the Messiah. And so the followers of the Messiah would be the faithful remnant among that historical remnant. The final remnant, the great future remnant of New Testament times, was the great incoming of the Gentiles, Romans and Persians and Germans and Africans and so on. The gospel expanded the promise that God had made to the Jews and opened the way for a great number of other people to become people of God. So you see, in New Testament terms, this remnant concept is never just a narrow single thing, but it can have multiple meanings. And I think that may be of some significance to us as we talk about this question in the book of Revelation. Now, in the book of Revelation, it describes the remnant as a people who will come at the end of the world, the close of Daniel's time prophecies, and these people will have a specific message which I have collected into 8 points. I mentioned these in a previous program, and now in our conclusion I want to bring that back. The message of the remnant contains the following pieces, and we want to give careful attention to these, because these are the messages that God is calling the world to hear and to heed in these days. First of all, the gospel. This is the everlasting gospel, the gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the gospel of Paul, the gospel that has been there from Genesis and all the way across. The last remnant will not preach a different gospel than has been there before. But that gospel will have a special flavor because it'll be united with the study of Daniel and Revelation. These are books that have often been misunderstood, but the books of Daniel and Revelation combined with the gospel will give a special flavor for the final message of Earth's history.
And it was Jesus who, in the context of the end of the world, said, go and study Daniel.
Yep.
It is the only book that he singles out when he's talking about the gospel going to the world. Probably it's the most neglected commandment that Jesus gave to his church, would you think?
That's right. And Jesus also said to John, you will prophesy again to many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. So Jesus himself has given the command that both Daniel and Revelation should be understood as we approach the end of time. The third part of the remnant's message is the heavenly sanctuary. And this is one where many Christians have shied away as well, because the sacrifices, the feasts and so on of Old Testament times are generally misunderstood or thought not worthy of study. And yet they played a central role in the way that the New Testament Christians understood the gospel.
And also, as we have been studying Revelation chapter by chapter, if we had not gone back to that sanctuary and understood it from the earthly, we wouldn't have got very far, would we?
Yeah.
The sanctuary has really been a guiding way through the whole series of Revelation.
That's right. Then the fourth aspect of the remnant's message is keeping the commandments, and that's been a theme throughout the book of Revelation. The fifth part is a warning of end-time deception. Revelation 13, you have this counterfeit trinity. It looks like God, it talks like God, it seems like God in today's world, and yet there's something not quite right. There's fire coming down from heaven, looks like Elijah, looks like Mount Carmel, but there's something not quite right. And the end-time remnant will be warning the world about these deceptions. They will definitely promote intimate relationship with Jesus, and it will come in the context of a pre-Advent judgment, the announcement to the world that God's final judgment has already begun. And there'll be one surprising element at the end, and that is that the end-time remnant will bring new light, new emphasis on the Sabbath. This is not to contradict the gospel.
No.
This is not to contradict the relationship with Jesus.
It's a response to the gospel.
That is right.
A loving response.
And so I've asked perhaps the world's leading specialist on Sabbath observance, how you actually practice the Sabbath. And I've asked her to tell us, is the Sabbath a legalistic thing, or can it be something that promotes our relationship with God? Let's see what she has to say.
Okay.
I love vacations. My husband and I just returned from a vacation in Yosemite National Park where we celebrated our birthdays. I joyfully discovered several years ago that I had worked my way up to 4 weeks of vacation each year from my work. And then I discovered something else, even more exciting, that we have 52 days a year of Sabbath vacation with God. That is actually 7.5 weeks, and I thought 4 weeks was a big deal. And in fact, this is an undistracted vacation with my King. Each day of this vacation with Him is a gift for us from a loving God, not a day taken away from us by a demanding God, and He intends that it be a delight and a blessing, not a burden. A day when we can set aside our weekday burdens and celebrate His goodness during the week. He invites us to call the Sabbath a delight in Isaiah 58:13. And the word delight means exquisite, royal delight. in Hebrew. So if possible, enjoy something exquisite during these holy hours, such as special food, special fellowship with others and with family to celebrate God's creation and His working in your life. The sky is literally the limit. So why is the Sabbath such a delight? Psalm 16:7 says, in His holy presence is fullness of joy. Try it, you'll love it because you love Him.
So you see, Sabbath keeping is not designed as a substitute for the gospel, a substitute for relationship to Jesus, but in the end time context, it becomes a very special part of that relationship with Jesus. Well, we talked a little bit about the remnant in the New Testament context, but the book of Revelation places this end time remnant in an end time context. And you remember the three types of remnant? Let's see them on the screen once more. Historical, faithful, final. Is there a historical remnant today? Is there a body of people that you could actually name and identify that have been used by God in the context of the final events, the close of Daniel's time prophecies, to bring these 8 messages of the remnant to the world? That's a question I would like to answer before I'm done. But second of all, is there a faithful remnant today? Are there some people who have a clear sense of what the book of Revelation is teaching? Maybe even institutions have lost their way on it, but the people of God who have a clear sense are God's faithful remnant today. And then I believe the book of Revelation is teaching us that there will be a final remnant, and that final remnant will be from every nation, every language, every people, every religion, every background that will hear the call of God and begin to find each other as kindred spirits in part of God's final cause, to become part of that army of God at the end, to become part of that wedding reception with Jesus Christ. So I believe that this remnant concept will again have a threefold significance at the time of the end. We've talked a lot in this seminar about the limitations of institutional religion. And it might lead us to think we better not trust in institutional religion. Maybe it would be safer to just have our faith all by ourselves. But the Bible doesn't encourage that. The Bible encourages us to worship in community. It encourages us to find fellow believers and spend time together and worship together. So swearing off all religious community is not the answer.
It's an overreaction.
Even if the institutions of religion have failed us, even if the institutions of religion sometimes do more harm than good, staying alone is not the answer either.
No.
So what are we going to do? Even though following Jesus is a personal choice, what are we going to do? I like the answer given by C.S. Lewis, the famous British philosopher and theologian, who was once an atheist and a skeptic, and he found Jesus. And he said that finding Jesus, becoming a Christian, is like entering a house. If you're in the house, if you have Jesus, you're in the house of Christian faith. Inside the house are many rooms. And those rooms are different denominations, different churches, different institutions of religion. He says some people will choose the Anglican room, and some will choose the Catholic room, and some will choose the Baptist room, and so on. And he says they're all in the house. All right? If you're in Jesus Christ, you're in the house. But C.S. Lewis said one more thing that has really been on my mind ever since. He says, don't be satisfied with just entering the house. That's the individual faith. That's the personal connection with God. And don't be satisfied with just any room. He says you want to look for the best room, the room which most clearly coheres with the work of God at this time in Earth's history. And I'd like to give a testimony to that regard. I believe that the best room in the house would be the room that most clearly teaches these messages of the book of Revelation, the gospel, Daniel and Revelation, the judgment, the relationship with Jesus, the Sabbath, the whole package. There is such a historical remnant, and that is my own personal testimony. It is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is for me the place that I have chosen to be. because it came on the scene around the time when Daniel's time prophecies came to an end. We're in the right time. That church is giving these messages that we have been sharing here. That church is giving it at the right time. I don't know of any other religious organization that is teaching these messages at this time, grounded in this book. Is the Seventh-day Adventist Church perfect? Oh, no, not at all. It's feeble, it's defective, it has a huge share of very troubled people. I think I know that about as well as anyone, having been involved with Seventh-day Adventist people on 6 different continents. But the place I need to be is the place that nourishes this message, the place that is learning and growing in spite of its faults. There are good Christians in every denomination, and I have met kindred spirits in all of them. But most places don't have the clarity on this message that I have found among the Seventh-day Adventists. Not every Seventh-day Adventist church will be as clear as others. But I would encourage our viewers to look for the best room in the house. Wherever you are, that I think is the mission that God would have us be on. When we return, Pamela and Graham will get to share their testimonies. Welcome to our concluding conversation, and we promised to give Pamela a chance to give her testimony. What incident caused you to decide to follow Jesus with all your heart?
Well, something happened that I cannot forget, and it was one afternoon. I guess I was around 16, and I decided that I would cook the family meal. Now, my mom's an excellent cook, and she taught me to cook, and I decided I would do the family meal. It was my mom and my stepfather and myself, and I busied myself in the kitchen. And it took me quite a while to get everything together. I cooked the entree and the potatoes and the gravy and the vegetable, and I had everything all ready. And so I put it on the table and the dishes, and had the tableware all set, and everything was nicely laid out on the table. And they had been drinking, and so I sat at the table. My stepfather sat at the table, but my mom was agitated about something, and I don't know what it was, but she was pacing the floor a little bit, and she wouldn't sit down. So we sat there and we're waiting for her to sit down. And finally, my stepfather said, honey, I'm hungry, sit down. And she marched over there, you're hungry, huh? Well, I don't know about that. And so she grabs the table and she lifts it up, and everything went off the table onto the floor. My whole meal was off on the floor, and everything's crashed to the floor. All of the meat and potatoes and vegetables and juice, and my lovely meal was instantly garbage. Everything was broken, dishes, silverware.
Including your heart, right?
Everything, including my heart. There it was, looking on the floor. There was my meal, potatoes and gravy, just, you know.
And what did you decide to do at that point? What did you see?
What did I think?
Yeah.
Well, all I could think about is, well, I was hungry. But I guess in my heart I thought, you know, I don't want to become like that. Yeah. That's, I guess the good thing is that the lesson I learned is that I figured that is not what I want to become. Because I was a teenager and had gone away from religion and church, had not been praying to God anymore, and I just decided, that was the moment I decided, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to become like
so you
that.
decided to break the chains.
Yeah.
Yes, and breaking the chains for you is turning to Jesus. That's right. But what became of your mom after that?
Well, the good news there is that she stepped out of the church for 25 years, but then she decided to come back.
So even your mom
Yeah.
has come back to
Yeah.
Jesus.
Even my
And
mom.
so
Wonderful.
Yep, yep.
you
yep.
suffered many things, but in the end, God has put it all together again.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah.
It's
wonderful?
really
That's
something.
the good news.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. You know, I had to make a decision to follow Christ when I was a young teenager. I was the age of 18 when I went forward at a Billy Graham crusade meeting to give my heart to Jesus. And I remember Billy Graham saying that when you become a Christian, he said, you'll never find a perfect church. The day you join it, it'll cease to be perfect. and churches are made up of ordinary people. And I began a search to find out which church, like John was saying, was the best room. And eventually I came under conviction that the Seventh-day Adventist Church was, I believe, the church that had a special message for people in this world at this time in history. It's not denying that others aren't good Christians. There are many beautiful Christians spread right across all denominations. But I believe that the Seventh-day Adventist Church had a special calling to preach a special message at this time in Earth's history to call people back to worship God as Creator. And the Sabbath certainly was a test for me. I guess I had to leave my job, which was in the bank. I gave up my career, and I had to go all the way to the manager of the top Victorian branch manager, explaining all the way up why I was keeping the Sabbath. I was captain of my football team. I had to go to the coach and all those other players who wondered what's gone wrong with this guy. He suddenly got religious. I lost a lot of friends. I had to go against people who were very dear to me in this world. And in many respects, I guess some people would say my hands were emptied, a complete change of life. But you know, I had found something far more precious. I had found Jesus. And if you've got Jesus, you've got everything. You've got hope, you've got meaning, you've got purpose in life. And it was with joy in my heart that I let these other things go. To be a king and priest and live and reign with Jesus for eternity, that's everything. You know, I want to thank you for watching our programs. There is no next program now, but I want to encourage you to find a Seventh-day Adventist church near where you are. Watch for a Daniel seminar. They run them from time to time. And we'd like you to follow on now from what you've been watching here and explore, study, learn and grow and find more hope, more meaning and more purpose in life.
If you've enjoyed this presentation on the Book of Revelation and would like more information, visit www.revelation.hope.meaning.purpose. You can purchase your own DVD set of this series or the booklets, which cover the content of each program.